The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 6. The Violet Keystone. Chapter 25.
I will be sorry to see the old cat go, Ebbet sighed, but I see your point.
Oh, I didn't mean your... Tal started to say.
We've had one rule for some and a different rule for others for too long,
said Ebbet. He leaned over and rubbed his green cat under the chin. It purred and shifted its head so he would scratch the best spots.
Got to set an example for you young folk, don't I? Now how do we go about it?
I don't know, said Tal. I thought you might.
Not on the curriculum,
Ebbet sighed again.
Finding and binding, that was it.
I know, said Malin quietly. You use a variation of the prayer to Astir to bind them in the first place. I can see it in the Ainarians. I can undo the binding between Tal, Mila, and the Storm Shepherds. I don't know about yours, Ebbet. The cat was unwilling originally, and the binding is very old and strong.
Do it then,
said Mila. She would get her own shadow back. It was a step toward being a normal ice carl again, a step she never thought she would be able to take. Yet at the same time, she had become used to Adras, and the Storm Shepherd had been a good and helpful companion, if a trifle annoying at times. Stand in a line, ordered Malin tentatively, next to one another. They all shuffled into a line, Ebbet still scratching the neck of his cat. Tal noticed that there were the beginnings of tears in the old man's eyes, but he didn't say anything. He was sad himself. All his life he had wanted a powerful spirit shadow to help him gain a high place in the castle. But all that was gone. If they survived, they would live in new times, and there was no place for Ainarian or human slaves. Malin began to chant as they stood silently in front of her. The words were familiar, many of them from what Tal now knew was the prayer to Astir, but with a different cadence and rhythm. He felt the words resonate deep inside his bones, sending a shivery, feverish feeling through every part of his body. The chant grew faster and stronger, and Malin began to stamp around in a circle, punctuating every 10 words or so with a heavier stomp, sending dust flying. Slowly, in answer to the words, shadows began to creep out of the 3 Ainarian creatures. Human shadows, which flowed slowly across the stones toward the feet of their original casters. Malin shouted the last word and came to a sudden stop. Tal felt his shadow reconnect, and the connection he had with Adras was totally severed. For a moment he felt thick in the head, as if he had a cold. Then he realized that the sense of the wind and the weather that came from Adras was gone. Tal turned to Adras, and Mila to Odris. Well, that's that, said Tal in a small voice. Thank you for everything you've done for me, Adras. I thank you too, Adras, said Mila. I hope you bear no ill will for the times I have been hard with you. Farewell.
Farewell? Asked Odris. We aren't going anywhere without you. Certainly not back to our old life at Riga Hill. Far too boring.
We're going to come and watch you fight Sharakor,
said Adras.
We'll even help if we can, though he is the overlord and all that.
The overlord? Asked Tal. His mind was only half on the conversation, as he was watching Ebbet kneel down by his cat and bare his neck, as if inviting it to bite him or something. Mila had seen it too, and was already moving across, ready to intervene.
Sure,
said Adras.
The king, or whatever, Odris said.
What? Asked Tal, tensing as the green cat leaned forward and opened its mouth, revealing teeth as white as its claws, but much larger. Would it kill Ebbet for enslaving it for so long? Mila took another step closer, the talon extending.
That's why we had to obey back in the Dark World, said Odris. Sharakor holds the oaths of most Ainarians from the old times, including our parents, but we don't have to obey him in everything. At least, I don't think so.
The cat licked Ebbet's face, making him splutter and almost fall over,
and jumped away, a green flash speeding through the runes. "That's what my shadow guard did," said Tal.
"He was with me for 60 years,
said Ebbet. He sighed and accepted Mila's help to get up.
"Well, we had best be getting on, children."
"Where?" asked Tal. "Where will Sharakor be? And how does he undo the forgetting?" No one answered him. It was clear from the looks on the faces of humans and storm shepherds alike that no one knew the answer to his questions. "I don't know," said Mila, "but I do know someone we can ask." "Who?" "Zika, the Kershkin," said Mila. "At Kershkin Corner, wherever that is." "Kershkin Corner?" said Odris. "I know how to get there, provided it hasn't moved lately. Assuming this is Rorn, which I guess it must be." "Rorn?" asked Tal.
"Rorn?"
echoed Ebbet. Mila and Crow looked at their shocked expressions. "Rorn is forbidden to the Chosen," explained Tal. "Though I don't know why. We were taught never to go there. Come here."
"The penalty is death,"
said Ebbet.
"I always wanted to take a look myself. This must be it. I know Rorn was a ruined city, heavily staked."
"Staked?" asked Crow.
"Staked through with sunstone stakes," said Ebbet, "like the Chosen Enclave, to stop it from moving around. If we see some of those, then it must be Rorn. I wonder whose city it was, and who lived here."
"Sharakor, of course," said Adras. "Even I know that. It was the capital before the forgetting. All Sharakor's people lived here before they got killed in the war. He's the only one left." "This was a city of dragons?" asked Mila. "No, silly," said Odris. "Sharakor isn't a dragon all the time. He's a double-ganger, or maybe a triple-ganger, a sheeper. He can turn into 2 or 3 different things, big like the dragon or small like a mind drill. The really bad ones that climb into your brain. That's what the Shapers used to do a lot. That's one of the ways they ruled everyone else in the old times." "Why didn't you tell us this before?" exclaimed Tal. "It would have been useful to know that Sharakor could become a shadow mind drill back in the castle." "You never asked," said Adras primly. "And I never heard you mention Sharakor at all, so it's your fault, not mine. And Adras didn't know because he never paid any attention to my lessons."
Never.
announced Adras proudly.
Too boring.
Tal sighed. If only he had taken Odris with him instead of Adras when they met the Empress in the Light Vizier. If only he had taken Odris with him full stop. But that was an old and familiar feeling by now. Adras was Adras, as Ebbet was Ebbet. They both had their advantages, he supposed. "Let's assume this is Rorn," said Mila, bringing them all back on track. "How far is Kershkin Corner, Adras?" "Half a day's flight, maybe less," Adras replied with a shrug. "If it hasn't moved." 3 or 4 days' walk, mused Mila. "Too long. Is there some way we can all fly?"
I could carry Tal and someone else,
declared Adras. He flexed the muscle in his puffy arms.
I am the strongest.
"I can only carry Mila," said Odris. "We could leave Ebbet or Crow behind. Or Malin." "No," said Crow. "It is my fight too. The free folk should be represented." "We can't leave anyone behind," said Tal. He was thinking as he spoke. Perhaps there was a way to use the Storm Shepherds more effectively. "Ebbet, what if we made a boat of light and sort of crossed it with a hand of light? If we could keep it going, it could lift us up and Adras could push or pull it." A little of Ebbet's usual spark returned to his eyes. This was the sort of thing he liked, a crazy idea that most Chosen would refuse to even think about.
"You have half of the violet keystone, which is very powerful," he mused. "If we bond the mesh with violet and weave it green, blue traces. Yes. What are you waiting for? There's not time to stand around. You start on a backbone of violet and I'll do the planking in green with yellow, perhaps."
Tal smiled. It was a little forced, but still a smile. Then he began to focus on his sunstone. He and Ebbet would build a flying boat of light, propelled by storm shepherds, to take them to Kershkin Corner and beyond.